am real excited about this conversation. Now, I've been knowing you for a while because we ended up doing, I think it was that photo shoot. That's the first time I ever met you. Was with this young lady that I'm having a conversation with today. It's my first time meeting her was a while back, a couple years ago. We had a photo shoot and she touched my heart. She had did a little voice review, and then a couple weeks ago, we end up connecting again for the second time in person at an event that she hosted. And so I'm having a conversation with my girl, and I believe that Lattifa is one of those people that God has called me to. And most of all, God has drawn me to. And so when I reached out to you to have a conversation, first of all, you was open and you was willing. But you have those people that you try to force yourself on, and then you have those people that just naturally like you just bond with. And my girl is that girl that I just really bond with, and I know that God has called us to connect and build not only a friendship together, but a networking business. I even see her like a mentor. I can learn so much from her personality. And so I'm gonna let you introduce yourself and then we're gonna dive right into the conversation.
Oh, wow. Thank you so very much. I am so grateful to be here. I'm grateful for the opportunity. And best of all, I'm just grateful to be able to be connected with you for all these years. I
Yeah.
mean, like you said, when you said that, I was like, wow, that really was our second time meeting in person. And
Hmm.
that is how you know God has been in the mix all these years. You are definitely a destiny helper. For those of you who don't know, my name is Lattifa, also known as the Author Queen. I am a ghostwriter. I am a publisher and an author of 20 books and counting. Okay. Um, and yeah, best of all, though, I'm a woman of God. I am God's girl. God, stay
Yeah.
pulling up and but it ain't always been that way. So yes, let's get into it. Thank
And
you
that's
so
what
much.
we gonna talk about. It ain't always been that way. But before we get into your testimony, I do want to ask, how did you get into you know, publication and then becoming an author?
Yes, great question. So for me personally, it honestly started when I was about 2 years old. My father was incarcerated, and I remember my mom would sit me down and allow me to write him or whatever. And I
Mm.
can still literally remember putting pen to paper, but I would always just scribble on notebook paper. Girl, I thought I was writing in cursive. So I wrote my father letters. In prison or to prison from the time that I was about 2 years old until
Mhm.
he finally got out of prison when I turned 11. And at the time when he got out, I wrote a poem called The Father and Me. And, I was used to writing. I always kept a
Mhm.
journal, whatever, whatever. So the little poem I did, it wasn't nothing. I'm in the sixth grade, right? But they was going crazy about this poem. They was like, "Oh my God, we need to get this published." Blah blah
Mhm.
blah. I'm just like, okay, whatever. I'm just happy that my dad just got out of prison. And so long story short, I ended up getting the poem published in the National Beta Club magazine. And so I was like, oh, okay. And again, I was like probably like 13 by the time that everything actually went through and I got the
Mhm.
magazine in hand. But I was like, maybe I'm kind of good at this. But I always kept the journal. I've always enjoyed writing, all the way through class, through high school. I was that girl. Most kids hated like, that we would do like a 30-minute journaling time or
Mhm.
when you first come to class. So a lot of kids hated it, but for me, like I was in my zone anytime it was time to write.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty much how I got into it. I honestly feel like I was born with it.
Yeah, and one of the books that you ended up giving me that you had written was Our Daughters Need to Hear Our Stories. Speak up, don't die with your story inside. And I did want to touch bases because I do want to get in your testimony. But honey girl, when I started reading this after the event, when I tell y'all, it did something to me. I'm serious. Then I started telling my mom about it. She was like, "You need to let me hold the book after you." I'm like, "You gonna have to give me a minute, baby girl.
Girl, please
We might."
give it to her.
Listen, we might have to order you your own copy. But why would you say though that it's important? yes, I strongly believe that it's important to have a relationship with God, and we're gonna get into that. But I also agree with everything. The outline, it just your whole testimony is amazing. But why would you say that it's also important to not die with our story inside of us?
Absolutely, absolutely. So there's a quote by, I believe, Zora Neale Hurston that I love.
Mhm.
And it says, if you're silent about your pain, people will kill you and say that you enjoyed it. And so,
Mm.
right? So for me, I'm like, okay, there's no way I can die with this story inside. I'm not gonna allow my nobody to tell my story for me.
Mhm.
This was at a time when, my closet was full, right? I had so many skeletons in my closet, but I was like, yo, I'm sitting around and I'm watching people trying to tell my story for me. And I
Mhm.
was like, nah, it's time for me to speak.
Yeah.
You cannot allow other people to tell your story for you. So that is why our daughters need to hear it from
And
us, you know?
yes, and not nobody else. And your story is so powerful. And you had mentioned, a lot of this in the book, especially your story trying to be told by other people and what you went through. And something that you said at the beginning, you had said, ain't always been this way. I'm a woman of God, but it ain't always been this way. And I know in the book you touched a little bit on your experience with witchcraft, and this jumping way ahead to college, but your
Sure.
experience with witchcraft in college. I think what, 2017?
Yes. Well, I started college in 2012. So
Hmm.
by 2013, yeah, I was really deep, deep, deep into it. And then from like 13, I would say from the time that I was 18 years old to the time that I was 28 is when I walked out of the will of God.
Oh, so that was a good 10 years.
Oh yeah. It was a decade.
So what contributed to that?
Whew, child. So yes, in my book, Speak Up, Our Daughters Need to Hear Our Story, I was very transparent, just letting the world know that it started, oh, I can't even say when it started exactly,
Hmm.
but I will say that I remember being 18 and feeling like, okay, God, you ain't that same Jesus that everybody taught me about. Like I was
Yeah.
literally angry at Jesus, girl. I found out that I was treating him like, my boyfriend. Like people kind of get
Hmm.
Jesus confused or they don't really understand what he means about, what the Bible means about his bride, right? So I'm over there like,
Hmm.
yeah, I'm married to him, whatever, whatever. So I don't broke up with him because these are my words, right? At 18. I'm trying to break up with him. I'm like, look, like this ain't working. Church ain't working. You ain't coming to my knees, not understanding that, I'm all out of his,
Yeah.
I'm not obeying, I'm not doing what his word said. I honestly had never even read his word. Like that is what really allowed me to really sit down at the age of 28 and say, you know what, let me get into this word because I'm tired
Hmm.
of once again learning about everybody else's experience with him and I needed my own. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And so how because when it came to that kind of practice, and we talk about practicing darkness, what that was introduced on college campus or outside of college? There was something that you saw that outside of college.
Yes, that is a great question. So, born in Douglas, Georgia, I was born in the church, raised
Yep.
in the church. I went to church every Sunday. I probably went to the club too, the night before.
Hmm.
But Sunday morning, I was at church. I was at Bible study. I sung in the choir. I praised, dance. I did everything. And like I said, by the time I got 18, I was just like, nah, bro, like I'm tired. Like, this ain't it. Um, the way that I got introduced to darkness, I would say that moment that I called myself breaking up with Jesus. And then just starting to listen. Once I mean it keeps going back to, listening to other people, but
Hmm.
just really listening to outside influences, not really having that relationship with him for myself.
Yeah.
So I just allowed people to lead me further and further and further away from him until I was, laying on the floor screaming and crying and saying, Lord, I yield. Lord, I surrender.
Yeah. And so in 2000, we're gonna go back to because I had Radio Book 2017. And you also have another book that is a branch off of this testimony when the day that you decided that you was gonna, I don't know if it was the day or the week, I can't remember. But basically you planned your own funeral. And so I wanted you to touch bases on that.
Girl, yes, this is great. This is spicy. So I did plan my own funeral because I went to college, y'all. And this is a right on time message. Just a lot of young ladies getting ready to go to college. I've
Yep.
actually been talking to some. And if you are listening to this, y'all, please don't let go of God's hand. Like that's what it
Hmm.
all really boils down to. Don't let go of God's hand. Um, but me personally, yes, in 2017, I think by that time I had got in this relationship. Y'all will
Hmm.
read all about it, okay? But I got in a relationship, got my heart broken. I got a sexually transmitted demon, and I was just like, wait a minute. Like I didn't
Yeah.
sign up for this, you know. I'm Lattifa Bryant. Like I just moved from Douglas to the big city of Atlanta. And like I said, I was getting further and further and further away from God. And I was
Hmm.
feeling like, God, are you punishing me for stuff that I did back in Douglas when I was 15? You know, like, you know how
Yeah.
you start beating yourself up. Um, I hope I'm answering the question. Like
You
27.
is this leading
Oh,
up to you planning your own funeral. You give us a
yeah.
background.
Thank you, girl. So yes, yes, yes. So yeah, I was really angry with God from during those times. And then I remember going to church around that time and Minister Angela Carr prayed for me
Hmm.
and she was like whispering in my ear and she said the funeral has been canceled. Girl,
Hmm.
I lost it. I
Hmm.
was like, wait a minute. I was like, oh, so God, dude, you do talk to me, you know? Like, and that's the
Oh.
thing. Like, not all words from people were bad. It's
Yeah.
just it really learn it for me. I had to learn and really pray for discernment. I had to really learn how to discern who was God sent,
Right.
and who wasn't. So yeah, she said the funeral has been canceled, and I was like, how you know? Like, oh, girl, I can go on and on, but
And but what made you besides college and you was dealing with breakup, your breakup because I don't want to, girl. I can tell the whole book. Cause I'm talking about
you can, you can.
yes, like I could tell the whole book. But one thing you had elaborated on is during that time working, I think beside a gun shop
Oh, yes, girl.
or
Yes, yes,
yeah. So a little bit about that, like what was your thought process?
yes.
Because I'm
That is
talking about the way you described it, it was very like strategic. Like for me, my suicide attempts was like, I'm just so overwhelmed, like one of those moments, it's just gonna happen right now. But yours was very like thought out.
very well planned, very thought out, very thought out. Yeah. So I used to work next door to a pawn shop, and again, thank you so much because a lot of this stuff, a lot I have to write it down because I've been through so much.
Yeah.
Oh, so yes. So thank you for bringing this back. So I work next to a pawn shop. And every day I'll be like, okay, when I get a big enough paycheck, I'm gonna go next
Hmm.
door, I'm gonna buy the gun, I'm gonna go through with it because you know how the enemy will do, just plant seeds in your ear. And it's not just the enemy, right? It's
Right.
yourself. I mean, you have lower thoughts. I will say my lower self. So this is all taking place during the times where me and my lower self, we were best friends.
Hmm.
So, like, girl, when we get off, we're gonna go to the pawn shop over here. We're gonna take this gun, then we're gonna go home tonight, and we just gonna end it all. Like, I had it all planned out. Like, and so my first book was literally like the first part of it. I walked you through like my thought process.
Hmm.
Like, and so it's like it's like in the first book I went through with it, and then immediately after I done it, I'm standing there and I'm looking at the window and I'm just looking at myself like in the pool of blood. I'm thinking about, okay, by 8 a.m., my mom is about to text me. By 9
Yeah.
a.m., it's time to go to work. And, I'm just freaking out and just really looking at myself. And also, if are able to get to the end of it, I'm also thanking God too. Even though I had called myself broke up with him at the time I wrote the
Hmm.
first book, but I'm thanking God, like, God, I thank you that you did not allow me to go through with that.
Yeah.
Just looking out that window, like, I thank God that I did not go through with it.
Yeah. Like, and that's another thing, being in that dark place. I'm talking about, it's so hard to see your way out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing that I do have for you. Also, a question that I have for you, like in the midst of that, how Jesus come back up? And you talking about a 10 year, I'm at the lowest. Like you said, I'm besties with my lower self. I cannot see. Cause I remember being at that season where, bro, I'm not
Woo.
optimistic about nothing. I can't see. All I know is negative thoughts, negative thoughts. Don't want to be in my body. That's number
Mm-hmm.
one. Hate itself. And
Mm-hmm.
what it was we talked about at the imposter syndrome.
Yes, girl.
Yeah, the biggest enemy ever, where you just and nothing that you do is good enough. And even when you surrounded by love, it's like
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel that love. Like how Jesus come in the midst of darkness, and especially at that time where, bro, you had to really think about the whole process. That mean you did it without doing it because you thought it. And so how Jesus came back up into that, into the lowest part of your life.
That's so good. Honestly, he never left. He was there all
There
along.
we
It
go.
was
Yeah.
just me who literally turned my back on him and was okay with it. I would say that I just about made a pact with the devil. Like I was okay
Mm-hmm.
with it. I knew what I was doing was blasphemous. But what got me was that once again, I did not start reading my Bible for real, until I was 28 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Baby, when I sat down and read the word and how he really talked about, like, talked against witchcraft and astrology, baby.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I was I was a Virgo from the time that I was 18 until about like 27 and a half.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't resonate with this anymore. But again, that's when I realized Jesus is not my boyfriend, he is my
There
father.
you go.
Like, oh my gosh. But how did Jesus come in? And like I said, he never left. So going back to that pawn shop, what stopped me from making that purchase is literally inside of the pawn shop. I can still see myself standing there. God was started yelling, literally like,
Mm-hmm.
didn't I tell you to go write that book? Didn't I tell you to go write about this? Why are you in
Yeah.
here? Of course, his voice was not that soft, but not like mine. But I was just like, oh, okay, I really need to get up out of here. Now, mind you, again, I wasn't talking to him, but I heard him that day.
Mm-hmm.
And so day after day, month after month, week after week, I started back writing because going back to my lower self, she didn't even like to write.
Mm-hmm.
Not like to write. That's how much the enemy did not want me to get this story out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm thankful because I have also been able to publish stories for people, like me, people who are like, oh my God, your book saved my life. I have
Yeah.
literally gotten text messages at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning on 5 different occasions from women saying I was about to end my life, but I looked at your book on my shelf, or I thought about what you said on page whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it lets me know that Jesus was always there for me. He was always there. He is the one who told me to write this book, to tell this story. And so even after I wrote it, because that's in there too, I fell back into depression. I started
Mm-hmm.
back listening to the enemy. But all in all, if you really read the book and if you look at my story, it all is it just draws back to the fact that I didn't know who I was. I didn't really
There
understand
you
whose
go.
I was, and I had never read my word.
Yeah. And then the struggle of condemnation. I'm sure
Sure.
you dealt with shame and condemnation. And so if you could give advice and speak life to like into that somebody who may be dealing with condemnation because they done been dibbling and dabbling and into
Absolutely.
everything, what you would say?
Absolutely. Oh, girl, that's a great, great, great
Yeah.
question. Great point. One thing I've learned about the Holy Spirit is the Holy Spirit does not condemn, he
Hmm.
convicts.
There we go.
So if you're feeling condemned, it's probably because you're listening to people, or it's probably, but if you're feeling convicted, oh yeah, you should, so anybody who is dealing with it, like I said, please study it, read your word about it, deal with your mess every day. And shout out to my apostle Kendra Whitehill. She has really taught us the importance of just praying and asking God, show me me, show me
Mm.
me. And actually, she is another one. I was at an event as a volunteer, girl. I think October 2021.
Hmm.
Girl, it was not for me. It was not about me. Nothing at all, girl. The event was over, and at the end of the event, Apostle Kendra Whitehill called me outside, And she was like, I need to talk to you. And she was like, first thing I want you to do is hug me. She said, I want you to hug me until all those broken pieces, just basically
Mm.
hug her and let it all go. So I was like, I don't know, yeah, but okay, I can use the hug right now because
Yeah.
again, I'm angry at Jesus. Um, and so it started with the hug, and girl, she just went to prophesying. She said, "You angry at God?" She said, "I hear the word abortion." She said, "You angry at Jesus?" She said, "But Jesus has still been Jesus." She said,
Yeah.
it's the people that you ought to be mad at if you're gonna be mad at anybody." She said, "But if you Jesus has still been Jesus." And I was like, what? Like, girl, so prophesied my whole life to me. And she didn't even know me from a can of paint. She was just like, hey. And so that I was like, okay, that was probably the biggest breaking point for me. So again, October 2021 with Apostle Kendra White Hill. Then by 2022, 2023, I'm getting
Hmm.
baptized, and whew, now it's a whole nother spiritual battle, but
Yeah,
it's
we
one.
gonna we gonna touch on
Yeah,
that just a little bit. What
yeah,
what so cause you say you got baptized in 23, right?
yeah. It was either 23 or I think it was 23. 23
Okay.
or 2022. I get it confused for when I rededicated my life. I think it was July 2022. I could be wrong.
Okay.
I have to write it down. What the book say? If it's in there, I don't know.
Girl, hold on. Cause I gotta get we gotta get the dates
Yes.
cause
Because
this
I
gon'
put the timeline up in there somewhere
yeah,
now.
you did. Let me tell you, when I say
Okay.
y'all got to get this book
I put it all out there.
because this I'm talking about this free me. Hold on real quick. It's a rededicated my life March of 2022, returned to church. And then you didn't put a date when you so around 22.
Okay. Yeah. So that means when I rededicated my life in March, I got baptized in July of 2022. And
Okay.
I had just met Apostle Kendra White Hill that October of 2021.
And so how much has your relationship with Jesus changed since then? Cause I heard that little that struggle. You rededicate your life to the Lord, you try to walk
Ooh,
straight, then boom, 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 boom. You get hit with a 2 piece, 3 piece, 4 piece.
baby.
You
Like
said,
my auntie, girl, like Auntie Paula said, if you cast it out, you better know how to fight it.
yeah.
And one thing I can say, I have learned to fight. I have learned to put on my armor.
Mm-hmm.
But baby, it is not so for me. I understood that, I learned that there's levels to this walk, right? You start
Yeah.
out, and then I feel like I'm in like level two or level three right now with moving from, you know, just being lukewarm to being all the way, you know what I'm saying, who he's
Yeah.
calling me to be. And that is the most uncomfortable step. But I'm here, I'm here.
Yeah.
At one point I was okay with being lukewarm. I was like, I'm gonna go to the club tonight and God will forgive me tomorrow. I'm way beyond that. But it's levels to it. But what I learned is that, this walk I'm not a super Christian just because I stopped cursing or
Mm-hmm.
stopped fornicating or stop dressing and wearing my cleavage out. You know what I'm saying? I'm not a super Christian. It's levels to it. And I'm just, I don't know, new levels. They like to say new levels come with new devils, but they also come with new angels. And
Yep.
so I'm just digging further and further and further into my walk. I'm in supplication all of the time, and I have really developed a relationship. And I just still have to go back to reading my word. Like,
Mm-hmm. And
you
that's why
gotta,
I'm at
yeah.
them different levels, like, and so I'm right around the same. I'm telling you, the same time frame as you. I rededicated my life back in 2000 between 2019 2020. It was coming into 2020. We're dealing with postpartum depression. But like you just said, girl, your girl was lukewarm. I was reading my Bible and smoking my gas. Girl, I be sitting in the backyard fighting, and I ain't glorifying it, but I'm being
No, not at
transparent.
all.
I'm
Mhm.
being real with you, baby. I was in the backyard smoke. I would smoke my gas. I would have to smoke before I read to sit me down. And
Baby.
I'm smoking my gas, reading my word. But I told the Lord, like, I'm even thankful for that season of God being so gracious to allow me to taste other things to see that He is all that I need. Because had I not dibbled and dabbled in that, I wouldn't have, I probably would have been a late bloomer with wanting to
Okay.
experience that. And so I started around the same time as you, and then now I'm finding myself in that season when you really walking with God. And then one thing that you don't reach a different depth to God when in his love. when you start to proclaim and then here come the enemy. Like what you said, like a different level. You got a
Mhm.
well, a new devil and the pressure get hard. And that's one thing I did want to just touch on what you just said. Like, if you finding yourself in your walk with Jesus, one of the worst ideas that I had was because I done gave my life to the Lord, I'm not gonna go through nothing else. And I think that's a lot of it's a misconception that we can get, and then we set ourselves up for failure. And it's like, but you realize when you are experiencing spiritual warfare and you
Mhm.
gotta walk in that armor, it's because you're growing in it.
That's right.
And that's what the Lord gave me. The analogy that the Lord had gave me was like, you would look crazy trying to put on your daughter underwear. She was like a 6. Why? And you a
Mhm.
grown woman. And so it gets to a point where that's gonna cause yeast infection, you're gonna be uncomfortable. And until you realize I'm trying to elevate you to
Right.
walking a bigger size underwear. And so that's what I'm finding myself experiencing this season too. It's crazy analogy. But I'm finding myself experiencing that too. And I just want to elaborate and encourage somebody like, don't think because you have given your life to God that you're not gonna experience persecution, that you ain't gonna go through nothing. And I think a lot of people get that misconception of that. I think I all kind of off track.
No, girl, I was gonna say though that is a wonderful analogy about your daughter because we outgrow our armor and we have
Mm-hmm.
to. He's always upgrading our armor. Okay, next. Okay, cool.
Yep.
She's moving up. So yes, it is we outgrow our armor. We also outgrow our friends. We outgrow our
Mm-hmm.
family. We outgrow different things, right? Because the Lord is going to remove everything that is not meant for you
There we
with
go.
where He's trying to take you.
And that's another thing. What you just said, outgrowing friends. How did you handle that? Because you mentioned that in the book. You had to let
Ooh,
some friends go. And girl, I
ooh.
went through, I'm being real. I had friendships that was longer than my relationship with my husband. And so when
Mhm,
I tell you your girl went through heartbreak,
mhm.
friendship heartbreak, how you
Ooh.
handle that?
Yeah, so my very first friendship, I would say betrayal, was when I got out of Greenleaf. That's how bad my breakdowns and how far I was out of the will of God, y'all. Y'all got to read about it. When I
Mm-hmm.
got out of Greenleaf, which is a mental institution, my best friend at the time had been telling people, "Oh, Lattifa is doing this for attention."
Mm.
And I didn't know that until her husband at the time told me what she said because he was shocked. He was like, "Yeah, you know, your best friend said you're doing this for attention."
Oh.
And that hurt me. And it hurt me because I was like, I've been so strong this whole time to the point where when I'm not okay, my very best friend doesn't even realize it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, okay, and it was also, again, my best friend would condemn me. I was being condemned. When that was one of the most critical moments where I needed to only hear God. There
Yeah.
are seasons when you have to cut those people off so that you can only hear God. A lot of times people are like, well, I didn't hear, he don't talk to me. Well, what else are you listening to? Who else are you listening to?
Mm-hmm.
And also pay attention to those dreams, baby. Dreams are important.
Come
I
on.
mean, for real, like if you really read and study the Bible, you'll know how important dreams are. Even starting with the birth of Jesus, came
Mm-hmm.
in a dream. So pay attention to those dreams. Don't stop dreaming. And that's the thing. I was around a lot of dream killers. I mean, you will know. You will, girl. Like you will know. But again, friends, I think they come to also sharpen our discernment. Like, let's be real,
Now
right?
that's good. I received that for this current season. That's good
Yeah,
now.
yeah, because I mean, you're able to see so much clearer when God really starts removing people out of your life. And it don't mean that you have to be, beefing. Ain't no beef. It's just
Mm-hmm.
are we on different levels? We in different seasons. And I needed to hear God for myself
Mm-hmm.
because she taught me this is another thing. She had this saying where she would always say, don't build me up and tear me down with the same tongue. She hated people who did that, but then she was one. And I
Mm.
had to I was like, oh, you're doing this. But then I realized that I have been doing this. So it's just levels and levels and levels of really God show me. God
Yep.
show me. God deal with me. God, how can I stop doing this? But I am so serious about don't pray for me and persecute me with the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to, I was like, Lord, surround me with the people who are gonna pray for me
Yep.
and help me in this season. So yeah, that's
And
where I'm
that's
at.
currently what, like, I love that you had said, it gives God, I'm paraphrasing, but situations like that, when you talk about friendships and any kind of connection, it's an opportunity for God to sharpen your discernment. And even a familiar incident just happened with this week, a conversation, a very uncomfortable conversation, had to be held. But then it was easy for me to kind of become defensive. And God was saying, even though what they were saying didn't have no truth, there is partial truth to it.
Mm-hmm.
Because God seek our heart. They saying this out of an ugly place. Let's just be real. That's why I ain't got no truth to it. But then
Right.
God was showing me why it does have truth. Because they may not interpret it correctly, but I needed you to hear that so that you can finally hear me. Because I've been at that season of, I'm talking about, very discouraged. This last, I say about 3 weeks, just so discouraged. And the Lord had said, in the midst of that, I'm trying to show you to you exactly what you said. I'm trying to show you to you because you think everything good, but everything is not. And that don't mean that God ain't proud of you, that you ain't came far. But I realized that it's some stuff that as women and as human beings, period, we can repress and suppress. And so
Mm.
you walking out and living out a behavior, and that's what God revealed to me. Basically, He revealed to me that, yeah, you might be 28-year-old Kamaya, but the little girl, the little 10-year-old, she was manifest during this conversation. And so
Mm.
I wanted you to see this, and I needed them to make you uncomfortable and bring it out so that you
Good.
can find a reason to depend back on me because you think you good and you're not good.
That's so good.
And so
Oh,
I
that.
love what you had said just then, especially with discernment. Like that can become
Yeah.
telling you, that's what the Lord made me realize this week.
Yeah. And thank him for that, you know.
Yeah.
And my new response to a lot of things is like, you know what? Thank you for the lesson. I'm always
Mm-hmm.
like, what can I learn from this? And what can I learn about me from
Yep.
this? You know, because it's really where that self reflection comes in at. And like you said, you know, once again, it goes back to those levels. I mean, it just shows us more work that we have to do, which is okay. I
Yep.
mean, I thought the same thing. Oh, I'm saved now. Everything gonna be perfect. I'm
Mm-hmm.
saved now, baby. Once you start confessing that you're saved and sanctified and filled, oh baby, you're gonna
Yep.
be tested like no other. You better know your word.
Mm-hmm.
The enemy studies you. Guess what?
Come
Witches,
on.
warlocks, devils, they get up and they're on their altars, right? They got witching hours, just like we have prayer hours. So
Yep.
you better know your word. You better know your prayer hour. You better stay on your post. And going back to that dark stage in my life, I knew again, those things were also sharpening my discernment
Mm-hmm.
because I could have a prophetic dream or a prophetic vision. I never forget God showing me that my great grandma was gonna pass away when she did, and
Mm-hmm.
then it's just like he had already showed me, he prepared me. But at the time, I was into witchcraft. And
Yeah.
so I also have to shout out Apostle Kendra. She wrote a book called Suffer Not in Which to Live, when she talks about the difference between Christians and those who practice witchcraft is the heart matter. And so for
Mm-hmm.
anybody who is listening and who was once a witch, or who is wanting to rededicate their lives back to Christ, it starts with the heart. It's a heart matter. So nobody's saying that you're not prophetic and that you're not gifted and that you're not able to prophesy and see things, but it is all about the heart. It's who you're doing it for that
Yeah.
that matters. And I don't know, I just felt led to share that. But
And
definitely.
I'm thank you. I thank the Lord that you just shared that because I it slipped my mind. I got to rambling, but that was something that I wanted to ask about when you was talking about it, like just because I've read up on it.
Mhm.
um Especially with, I can't think of the pastor name, Pastor Derby, Stephen Derby, who done
uh,
passed, but he talks a lot about witches and warlocks, and you need to know how to fight your enemy. But then my question to you was literally gonna be, the because you experienced it and you was in it for 10 years, how much different is it with being a Christian? Because from my understanding, all it is perversion. So it's
Mm,
everything what God intended for us to be, but it's perverted.
very much. Yeah,
Yeah.
very much perverted, very much demonic. It's very
Mhm.
much an agreement, and it's crazy because people are so quick to say I'm not giving my life to Jesus, but are willing to give their life to everything but Him. you know,
Yeah.
and so it was just one of those things where no, Father, I need you to come into my life, and it's dangerous as well when because I didn't have nobody to answer to for real, right?
Hmm.
I was a queen and a priest and a black
Right.
girl magic this and all I had was my sage and my crystals and I don't care what nobody say, baby. Ain't no them rocks ain't got no power. Them rocks ain't got no power. I'm speaking
Yeah.
from experience. I had crystals in my bra. I had ancestor money. I had sage. I had frankincense. I had myrrh. I had I did everything except tarot cards, and that I'll talk about that too, honey. I would go and get a reading, and they'll tell
Mhm.
me stuff like, "Oh, yes, you're going to get accepted into law school tomorrow." And girl, I'll get a letter by the end of the week, and that thing be done deny me. So I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay." I'm just seeing over and over where God is really wanting to sharpen my discernment and letting me know, like, I don't belong on this side. I rather work for the kingdom, you know.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's just and the thing about me, I have no regrets. I literally have no
That's
regrets.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, I have no regrets. I'm just so grateful. Like I said, the crystals, the sage, the rocks and stuff, they wouldn't come into my rescue when I was going in and out of that pawn shop or when I was laying on that floor at 3 a.m.,
Yeah.
thinking about suicide. I had my prayer partner on the other line, Minister Carr, she was praying me through. And I kid you not, girl, my cell phone died, and I could still somehow hear her praying. She was like, "You there, Tifa? You there?
Yeah.
Girl, my phone screen is black.
The Lord knew
They
what he
have
was
said
doing, my
power
God.
off." And that same lady, 3 years later, spoke to me in church and said the funeral has been canceled. Girl, I was
She
like,
was
okay.
that voice. Listen.
Mhm.
She was definitely that voice.
I'm telling you, girl.
And
I'm
then real because we finna get ready to close out. But I do when you was talking about that, something came back to my memory that I had read in your book. And because this season that's something that I ain't gonna say I'm struggling with. Yeah, I'm struggling with. But my struggle is being black and being a Christian and being black on top of being a woman, a black
telling
woman. And so I had read in your book how African spirituality.
you.
Because, with your father going up prison and then wanting to honor and have respect for your ancestors. Like what when it comes to being a Christian and a black woman and also still honoring our ancestors, but not necessarily worshiping our ancestors, what does the line get drawn and when does it get crossed? Because
Right.
like what I'm dealing with now in this season is being a part of certain groups that I have to deny my blackness in order to be an acceptable Christian, or I have to rid myself of certain language, the way that I speak, the way that my
Mhm.
behavior, my posture, and their thing is submitted to Jesus, but then it looks like y'all. It looks
Mhm.
like them, and then it's denying me. And so being torn in because I'm not gullibly open-minded.
Mhm.
I had discernment, but I don't mind listening to other people's belief systems, opinions, and staying firm in my faith. And so I listen
Mhm.
to a lot of different psychologists who they practice what it is, the African, what it is. I can't, well, whatever Dr. Umar is.
Okay.
Dr. Umar, and it's like African, it ain't African spirituality, but they pan African. That's what it is.
Oh yeah.
Pan
Okay.
African. To where
Mhm.
it's just you so pro black that you anti everything else, in my eyes. But some of the stuff that they be saying, and then you got the psychiatrist Amos Wilson, who was a psychiatrist during the 80s and the 90s, and he was pan African. And they're all about black culture, black identity, uh black psychology and the studies of the black mind, but then it's like reject other races. And so that's what I've been struggling with. Like
Mhm.
listening to them, I appreciate that because it's like being a Christian, you can be a Christian, but you don't need to be black.
Mm.
And if you do celebrate being black or you embrace your quote unquote blackness, what
Mhm.
makes you different than other Christians, white Christians, to be exact, that it's a problem. And so
Okay.
when does that line gets crossed? And how do you draw that line in the sense if it is one, or I'm just supposed to be Christian and forget being black?
That's so good. So a couple of things with that. Dr. Umar and the Pan-Africanism movement, I got lost up at that at one point as well.
Mhm.
I had never heard of African spirituality and African American studies. Like I said, from literally I was born in the church and up until I was 18. When I moved out to college, right, once again, the enemy had me exactly where he wanted me. And I tapped up into my studies as well. And I got woke,
Yeah.
as they call it. But my thing with that movement, one thing that helps me is being able to decipher um, who truly has accepted Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior.
Hmm.
If you, it, one way to spot a witch is never going to say Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior.
Hmm.
A witch is never going to say I love the Lord, you know. And so with that, again, I was pulling further and further away from Pan Africanism because I'd never heard. And this was the people that I was watching at the time. They was
Right.
preaching against Jesus. They were saying like, "Oh, the letter J was not even created in the
Right.
alphabet."
Yep.
And I'm telling you, I've done all that. But again, when I was on my bedroom floor at 3 a.m., baby, that was the only name I knew. And you're
Hmm.
talking about somebody who, if something about the name King Jesus came on by Kurt Franklin, you had to turn that. I could not stand it because it irritated my demons.
Hmm.
So for me personally, once again, you're able to decipher a witch by whether, I mean, because you'll see a lot of God this and God that on threads, but you're not going to see a lot of Jesus Christ. Okay.
Yeah.
So you have to really learn how to decipher between the two. Um, so that's kind of that first part. And then the second part is, again, as a publisher, I work with all different kind of people. Girl, I work with more witches than I would like. Okay. And I'd be like,
Hmm.
God, I try to be patient because I needed somebody to be patient with me. But I'm telling you, once again, you will be tested. You
Yeah.
will be tested, girl. But anyway, I was working with a particular author and shared with them, I said, the movement that you're doing is amazing. I said, and in your book, I didn't feel any type of way because I don't know, I just felt like he allowed, he made space for pro-black Christians. And he just said, yeah. He was like, being pro-black, your religion or your belief system should not impact the fact that you just are pro-black. Like, you believe in black enhancement and black wealth and black health and so you just kind of, I think it goes back to discernment, really and
Yeah.
truly. Just don't get lost. Don't get lost
In
in
it.
that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what God was convicting me on because of the conversation that we had this week that we sat down with some people this week about it, and it was just crazy. That's number one. But God revealed myself in it. And what kind of what kind of bothered me is my personality is very strong. It's very
Mhm.
strong. Now, if God's still transforming and renewing me, yes. But in certain settings, it kind of get labeled as almost ghetto
Mm,
and almost unacceptable, as if I don't know, all Christians is supposed to behave a certain way, talk a certain way, look a certain way. And one
right.
statement that was made was even your personality traits, it need to be submitted to Jesus. And my question is like, what does that I was thinking in my head when the person said it, like, what does it look like? And it kind of feels like it looks like how you want it to look, to where it
Mm,
makes sense to you. And one thing the Lord had gave me, concerning that, like, your blackness, your nationality, who you is, if it contradicts who Jesus is, don't embrace it.
that's so good.
And that's what the Lord had. But I didn't want you to touch on that because I had remember reading your book and you had mentioned about, honoring your ancestors. And again, whatever, you know, whether you white, whether you black, Hispanic and a Christian, if your personality trait and your beliefs and what you so pro over, if it contradicts who he is, who Jesus is, the
Hmm.
character and the essence of Jesus, then it ain't of him. It's not of God.
Absolutely.
And yeah, that's I had to share that conviction. That's my own personal conviction. He said the same thing, and this I know it's the Lord. The Lord used you. You told him the same thing, girl. Don't get caught up in that.
Don't get caught up in
But
it.
you
And no,
gonna know what you need to tear off and what you need to keep. Because
that's
God
it.
gonna take you through that fire and that burning. And so before we get ready to transition into end of this, I got two questions for you.
Okay.
The first question is, in this season, what would you say your favorite or your go-to scripture is?
Ooh, that is good. I would say, I will restore to you the years that the locusts and the cankerworm have eaten. I believe it's Joel 2:26, I
Ooh,
believe.
you know, prophesied on my life.
Girl, I will restore to you. And if you keep reading, he's like, you will prophesy, your nations will prophesy, your daughters
Mhm.
and your sons. And that I have literally watched the Lord restore the years. Oh my goodness. So yeah, I'm
Mm.
standing on that one. I'm standing on that one. And
Yeah, I received it.
yes, girl. And going back to really quickly about the of the, African American studies and stuff, a lot of that condemns Christ. You're not gonna really hear them talking about any other religions and going against them, but they work hard to, you
Yeah.
know, condemn Christ. So
And I
yeah.
hear that a lot, especially with don't get me wrong, like psychology wise, because I've been
Hmm.
doing research on psychology, want to go back to school to that. I can agree with, scientifically some of the stuff that Dr. Umar say.
Hmm.
But for the most part, he is definitely, hey, I'm probably gonna get some backlash for this, but he is definitely one of those that's anti-Christ.
Yeah, yeah,
He's
exactly.
anti the church, especially black church. He's
Hmm.
anti Christ. And I realized that with those who believe in the and practice the African or Pan African that however again I would say scientifically and psychology wise very intelligent man, but just like what
Absolutely.
you said, they deny most of them, if not all of them. Their whole practice, it denies Jesus Christ, and that's what the conviction the Lord gave me. Don't get caught up in it, because you could be led astray by
Mhm.
it. And if it
That, that,
contradicts who I am, it's not me. And that
that,
don't mean that God hasn't made us all uniquely different, and that we are supposed to. He want us to just self-hate ourselves, hate your skin
right.
color, deny who you is and where you come from. That's not one of the requirements, but the requirements is submit all your ways to him and he will make to him. That's a key
To
word.
him.
To
That's good.
him. And
That's
he
good.
will make all your paths straight. So just because everybody in your family act a certain way, when you come into Christ, but it's all about, because it's not about works, but
Hmm.
God power want to be made manifest to you and through you.
That's
And
right.
so it's not something that you can just put off and pick, but it's really leaning on him and leaning into him. God, if you don't like it, I need to stop doing it.
I need to stop. And yes, and also too, I mean, because you did talk about the ancestors, and with Pan Africanism too, a lot of it also stems at somebody who got angry with God somewhere. So
Ooh.
I encourage you, if you are that person who is angry with God right now, talk to him about it. Because
Mm-hmm.
one thing I've learned is that is one of the enemy's attacks. That is one of his traps. He comes to deceive us. He comes to make us not read our word, to forget our word. He don't want us to know and see and hear
Yep.
and understand what God has for us. And at the end of the day, and again, something that helped me to heal from, oh, I'm angry with Jesus. I'm this and I'm that. Jesus never changed. His word
Mm-hmm.
says it is written. That word is not going to change. He hasn't changed. When you really look at, some of the stuff and things that was going on that was so terrible, it wasn't coming from Jesus.
Come
He
on.
died for us.
Come
Like,
on.
you know, and then the things with the ancestors, I learned that, that's necromancy. I don't have any business communing and talking to the dead.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people try to say, oh, well, Jesus died. No, baby, Jesus rose on the third day.
Come on.
That's the difference.
Come on. He is
So I
not a
don't talk
dead
to them.
God. He is not a
Come
dead
on.
God.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that because, yeah. Mm-mm.
Yes, ma'am. I'm talking about this one of them conversations now, but some of the women that I've had conversations with is mainly sharing their testimony and experience as, moms and all of this, but this is beautiful. And I feel like the Lord is all up in it because this is truly for most people it's controversial and it's uncomfortable. And many
Yep.
people just act like they walk with Christ. It's just so perfect. They ain't dibbed and dabbed and ain't struggled with lukewarmness and unbelief. But I feel like when I say you done open up and done being very transparent and your voice is powerful and necessary and needed, it really is. One thing that you did say was, the enemy plays tricks and wants you to be mad at God. And I found myself, I share my testimony all the time, being angry over the loss of my biological father and not being able to have that relationship. But what I also realized is the enemy don't want you to know Jesus,
Come
be in
on.
relationship with Jesus, because the enemy understands and know. Well, first of all, the Bible says that my people perish for the lack of knowledge. And
Right?
that's straight ignorance. And the enemy feeds off of your ignorance about knowing who you are. And so
Yes,
when
it is.
you discover Jesus, who Jesus is, you discover who you are. And the enemy don't want you to don't tap into that. You can tap and play around with everything else. You can go to church. You can shout around. Folks can lay hands on you. You can throw up. You can jump two
Mhm.
times. As long as you don't know and stand on what you know about who you are in Jesus, the enemy is not moved. And I want to, as we transition out into this conversation, I want you to let the people know, what does it mean to be her? Who are you in Jesus? Because with the Being of Her podcast, it means to be her, holy, evolving, and in relationship with Jesus. Because I believe that we find who we are in him. And so,
Mm,
what does it mean, if you could just summarize, what does it mean to be her? What does it mean to be you, the Lattifa in
absolutely.
Jesus?
Absolutely. For me, I remember people saying, "Oh, you're the next Oprah." And I'm like, "No, no, I'm the next Lattifa Bryant
Hmm.
because her story is not my story. My story and Oprah, another one. I enjoy her, but I ain't never heard her call on the name of Jesus.
Hmm.
But that's another story for another day. I'm the next Lattifa Bryant. Everything I've been through was more of uh really a slap in the enemy's face because the more
Yeah,
that I kept getting up, right? You talking about the girl who was diagnosed as bipolar, schizophrenic, she's gonna need these medications for the rest of her life. She's
not
gonna
this
be in
good.
grief. She's gonna be, yeah, she's I mean, because the enemy knew that I had a story and he didn't want me. I tell y'all in that book, I got the title of my book inside of a mental institution. Like, this is real life. So knowing that everything I've been through has made me everything I am, and knowing that God doesn't waste anything and he don't make no junk,
Yep.
that's to me what it means to, just be her. And I mean, I love the acronym that you all are using. I mean, that within itself is a tool, it's a process, right?
Hmm.
And sure that you have your spiritual tools with you at all times. Put on your full armor of God. Do not leave home without the armor. Do not leave home without it. And remember, it's okay to outgrow your armor. It's okay because God is great and He's going to give you new armor. That's completely okay. But to be her is to be everything God has called you to be, and be confident. Don't, you know, depression and anxiety, all of that doesn't come from God. I mean, that doesn't come, that's fleshly stuff. So really get into your word, study your scripture, and know what God, says about you and who he says you are. Tune everybody else out.
Yep.
Get into your word, study your word because the enemy studies you. So yeah.
That was good. That's a whole quote. Study your word because the enemy studies you.
Mhm.
Uh, and I thank God for you. Do you hear me? I thank God for everything that you're doing. You have inspired and encouraged me so much, and especially with the book. If y'all, I'm telling y'all, first of all, follow her on social media, and definitely if you one of those who are, because I feel like a depression for me, it stemmed up from suppressing and repressing my story and my truth, because you want to recreate just a new you without embracing who you was. You know what I'm
That's it.
saying? And when I say this book, our daughters need to hear our story. Speak up, don't die with your story inside. And of course, she got over 20 other books that y'all can read, but this one definitely hit home from hearing your testimony and how you can just really, it's healing attached to that and revisiting everything because you realize God was in the midst of it all,
Mm-hmm.
never left, never forsook
Whole
forsaken
time.
you, and it's a part of what your story. And so I thank God for you, number one. Number two, I believe that it's somebody who was listening to this that needed to hear this conversation and this testimony and this word. But I also believe that God is about to do amazing things through you, woman of God. I'm so for real. You are a voice, you are a pillar to not only this community, but this world. The world need to know you. And
Thank
like you said, you ain't no Oprah Winfrey, baby. You Lattifa Bryant.
you. Period.
And listen, that God, when God be lifted up, the word says, if he be lifted up, he'll draw all men unto him. But another thing is, God had said, if you're lowly and humble, God will lift you up. So that means when I'm lifting up God, God is lifting up me, and the
That's
people
it.
that I'm called to gonna be
That's it.
drawn to me. And so this is the start of that drawing. I believe that. And well, it been started. But this just gonna add into that drawing. And so I thank you. I thank those who are listening. Hey, we definitely talked about it. We're gonna talk about it on the next conversation. I love you. I just want to say I love you while this recording.
I love you. Thank you so very much. And to your listeners as well, those who are interested in writing and telling their stories, pray about it first, but also know that, you cannot have the platform without the process. You cannot have the book without the actual story. So let God use you. And one way to know that you have healed and that you are moving on and getting better is when you can go back to that dark tunnel and you can go back to that dark hole and look at it without falling in it. And that is for me what life is all about. I thank God for that. I thank you for that. I thank you for your platform. I thank you for taking my photos that day, pulling me out of that dark tunnel. And girl, I just start crying if I really get into detail.
Yeah.
But you are my destiny helper, and I thank you. I love you, and I appreciate you.
Yes, yes. So we're gonna talk about it on the next conversation.